Hello, croeso. Welcome to the Senedd Sources podcast, where we take you inside Welsh politics. I am, as always, Ollie Cole, and also with me on the pod, we have Craig Lawton, who is a political advisor and candidate for the Welsh Conservatives, now working at Grasshopper Communications. Hello, Craig.
Hi, Ollie.
And a big week for Craig's Correspondence Corner coming up a little bit later in the podcast. And also with us, Jo Kiernan, former advisor of the First Ministers Roderick Morgan and Carwyn Jones. Before that, a journalist, now at Cavendish Consulting. Good morning, Jo.
Hello, both.
Hello. And a full letterbox for Jo this week as well. So we've got a lot of leaflets to get through a little bit later in the podcast, and a lot of news to get through as well. On the podcast today, it has been a bonkers and busy week. We will talk Reform UK's candidates, Labour's manifesto, Plaid Cymru's campaign launch, Green Party's campaign launch, and plenty more. There's so much going on. It's pretty breathless as we run up to May's election. And along the way, any questions and comments, do send them in. We have a WhatsApp number, and you can pop that into your phone. 0333 404 6507, the number you need. Start your message with the word Senedd, and we'll read them out in the next episode. You can also email us at hello@senedsources.com. So do that along the way, and that will fill next week's podcast quite handsomely. But for this week, let's dive straight in, sort of, Jo and Craig, picking up on what we were discussing at the start of last week's podcast, which is we got this slate of candidates from Reform UK in Wales. And Craig, it's not been an easy week for those candidates. A fair few of them no longer exist. In fact, in one seat, sort of half the list has disappeared entirely.
Yeah, as I say, when you started off saying we have a full slate of candidates for Reform, we have a slightly less full slate of candidates for them now. It's been hard work for us as well, because honestly, like every hour I have to find out genuinely which Reform candidate has stepped down most lately. It's really confusing, actually, as to what is going on. They all seem to have their own reasons. Some of them axes to grind, it appears. Others subtly or less subtly asked to step down, potentially for various previous actions. So all in one seat within reason, it seems, as well. So it's very confusing.
And
I think it's quite a bonkers family fallout, don't you? This is just 3 out of 6 candidates in the Bridgend and Vale of Glamorgan constituency. Rumblings, too, that a 4th person is considering stepping down from that list. And I think it shows an underbelly of real discontent in the way the party is organised. It's a really new party. I don't know whether they've got the structures in place that the traditional parties would have. But, you know, Derek Jones, one of them, quit for personal reasons and they haven't been made public. Fair enough. Owain Clatworthy has left in protest at the selection process, saying poor internal decision-making, a lack of discipline, serious concerns around candidate selection, and that Reform is no longer operating in a way, I'm quoting, in a way that reflects the standards I believe the public deserve. He's now in spats on Twitter and other social media channels and claims that party has vetted candidates poorly. He points to Corey Edwards, the other one from that list, who had to stand down after a photo was found of him performing a Nazi salute. It's not, Ollie, I think, the way that Reform would want to be starting their campaign.
No, we knew it was going to be a little bit bumpy. It always is when you throw out a load of candidates. I mean, if you look at the race in Scotland to Holyrood, I mean, every party has been engulfed in having to drop some candidates from the SNP, Labour, Greens, Reform. Everyone's had some troubles. And this is what happens when, candidates sort of meet the public media scrutiny in reality. But the public nature of the infighting of this and how little you have to scratch the surface in the party in Wales to get some sort of rise or some sort of complaint from someone doesn't go, but you don't have to scratch very far. Patrick Benham Crosswell, resigned from the party last weekend. He said the professionalisation of Reform UK had led it to take its members and candidates for granted. Politics is a dirty game, but Reform has sunk deep into the sewer when it should have been a beacon of decency, which is just a sort of blistering quote. And in all of the comments underneath these, you get a lot of people who are minded to vote Reform. And I think this is the danger. A lot of members saying how crazy this decision making is. We talked last week about, some of the people that we'd spoken to on the podcast previously sort of popping up in seats we hadn't quite imagined that they would pop up in. It turns out that is because the party basically told them where they were going to stand rather than the candidates themselves having a full say. And there's also an element of this, Craig, which is if they don't get a grip on it pretty quickly, I think it's about 5 days left for the sort of all the candidates to be officially registered. If you don't have the full list of 6, you can't spend the full amount in your campaigning as you go through it. So there's a much wider consequence of all this.
Yeah, and you look at someone like Owain Clatworthy as an example, who was 6th last on the list for Reform in the Bridgend and Vale seat. And this is someone who's pretty young, pretty new to politics within reason. And you think they were filling within reason with respect to him, the bottom of the list anyway, to get that quota. They're losing people. So the question, I guess, is where do you go now? If you look through the lists, again, with respect to some of these candidates, there are duplications of surnames suggesting, and the Conservatives have done this as well, suggesting they're already getting friends and family members to possibly fill in those bottom spots so they can get that full quota. The issue is, where do you go now? And if you announce another 3 people, is someone going to go and find information about them? I guess the issue though is that, let's take Corey for example. A lot has come out about things that he's done and said online in the last few years. These have been waiting to come out. It appears these have all come out pretty quickly. Someone has been holding on to these. It seems. Why could they not be found during some kind of vetting process? That's the big question, I guess.
And I guess too, I'm told that, people are now hanging on to certain stuff until after that deadline for nominations closing on the 9th of April, so that, there's more to be gained from damaging a candidate post then. But I think it can give us an indication of what we might expect from the Reform group in the Senedd, whatever size, largest, second largest, whatever that turns out to be, because they have garnered their members from, a wide range across society. I'm not sure there's that cohesion. They don't know each other particularly well, a lot of them. They don't have long friendships or relationships. Going back to Mr. Clatworthy, one of our listeners, Jeff, sent me a photo this morning, a picture of him with, a Labour foreign minister and a former Labour minister and other Labour people. These are people who have kind of, scattered around looking for a political home. And I do think, given what we're seeing now, it's going to be a hell of a job, and there'd need to be proper party and group processes put in place, because I think tensions will inevitably arise once they're sitting in that 96-seat Senedd too.
Yeah, I mean, this goes not only to the run-up to the election, but also what happens after it. And it goes back to partly what we were discussing last week, which is the problem with this is not necessarily that, every person voting in the Senate election like us knows the name of every candidate who's dropped out, or even we're struggling to keep up with some of them, but Reform's whole pitch, and this is what people have been saying in their sort of resignation statements when they've been standing down, when they've been talking about it, is their whole pitch is that we are not like a normal political party. We don't have this chaos. We don't have this internal factionalism. We all just believe in common sense politics and want to make the country better. And so if voters then see this cloud around the party, which basically says it's just as chaotic as everyone else, and, there are internal party squabbles just like everyone else, it starts to disaffect. It starts, that worrying thing where people who are already disaffected by politics who've gone to Reform get even more disaffected by what they have seen as the answer in the run up. Now, one Reform insider, quite senior in the party, put it to me that these are growing pains, and they're happening not just in Wales but across the whole local election list as candidates are being picked. That they've now got, essentially, as they are growing, as they are professionalising as a party, they've got constituency groups. With that comes, and like you say, Jo, people coming from different political backgrounds to find a new political home. With that comes, as they put it, petty squabbles, local disagreements that weren't having to happen before. And they essentially all think that Nigel Farage is the man who needs to answer it, because there is no necessarily sort of much larger framework taking place. So they all sort of see Nigel Farage as the one man who is the leader. They think he can answer and solve all their problems, and therefore those petty squabbles end up going right to the top of the party, when in reality in most other parties they would reach a sort of branch level or something like that and not go much further. So it's a difficult one, because it shows both that the party has grown, that it's having these problems, that it is suddenly having to professionalise and having to work at probably a scale that Nigel Farage's parties haven't had to before. But with that is coming exactly what happens when that happens, Jo.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can imagine Nigel's phone pinging constantly with people saying, why haven't I been chosen for my home area? Why am I number 6? Whatever. I was talking to someone senior in Reform earlier in the week, and they were at pains to say that their approach for this election is pragmatic and businesslike, not ideological. And with that, they said that, they aren't aiming, we talk about right and left blocs, they're not aiming for, voters on the right. They want it from across the spectrum. And that's actually what they've got to some degree, isn't it? But the tensions then are inevitable. He also said to me that, he thinks that post-election, neither they nor the Conservatives will want to do a deal with each other. And I think it's interesting, because I've said this before, and I won't attribute it to anyone else, but, my strong feeling is that the best and safest option for them is to be the largest group in opposition. I can't see how they can form a government on the basis of what we're seeing at the moment. They could. Would it last? I don't think so. Now, one other thing, Craig, wanted to put it to you, because...
Oh, no.
No, well... Dan Thomas, the Reform UK Wales leader, announced his deputy leader this week, Helen Jenner, the lead candidate in Bangor, Conwy Môn. Born in Neath, we're told, raised in Ynys Môn, left to teach in the west of England, now come back to Anglesey. I have to admit, I'd never heard of her, but I also just wondered how miffed some of the more experienced hands like Laura Ann or James might be after hearing this. Or do you think they're tainted by having been Tories before?
Well, I think, you've got Dan Thomas, who obviously is very clearly a former Conservative and is based in South East Wales from a constituency perspective now. And choosing a deputy leader who is from a very close area to that, or even in mid Wales, makes you look very focused on one area. And also, as you say, being former Tories, what they've done is they've chosen someone from the polar opposite of Wales, the northwest of Wales, representing Ynys Môn and Bangor area, but also someone that doesn't have a Conservative background. I understand that she's somebody that has essentially been a Nigel Farage activist, fan and supporter for some considerable time, who was a Brexit Party candidate during the last but one general election, and she was a UKIP supporter before that. So again, I think part of this is messaging around the fact that, this isn't just a group and a collection of former Conservatives. There is a wide breadth of people with different experiences across the party. And look, I think some people will go, oh, she's from Neath. Why is she standing in North Wales? Let's remember, I have no issue with this whatsoever. Rhys ap Iorwerth, who is the MS for the next couple of days still until the Senedd is disbanded. Rhys ap Iorwerth is the MS for Ynys Môn, but Rhys was born in Tonteg. in South Wales. So look, there's no issue with that before anyone starts pointing out that as being an issue.
I don't think we did raise it an issue, but
No,
just
but I
as
think some people will.
yeah. Just to be even-handed on this as well, I think it's important to say that we've been talking a lot this morning about reforms, woes with candidates, and of course, a Plaid Cymru candidate has had to stand down as well after the resurfacing of offensive social media posts he's made. Won't be the last, will it? But just to make clear, it's not just Reform having this problem.
And can
No,
I just make a point
indeed.
on this as well? Look, the two parties that people are finding things out about are Plaid Cymru and Reform. And I would say if people are finding out things about you or looking for them and saying things about you, it's because they're concerned about what's going to happen in the election. Is anyone digging up stuff on Labour and the Conservatives? No. And there's probably a reason for that. Let's be realistic.
Indeed. Well, let's dig up some stuff on Labour. Namely their manifesto, Jo, and you've been involved with plenty of Welsh Labour manifesto and looked over it. Senedd Morgan launched it this week, so we now know their pitch for the election. What were your first impressions? Is it going to do anything? Is it going to move the dial in any way in Senedd and Labour's favour, do you think, Jo?
I think two things, really. I listened to the live stream and I thought the speeches from both Hugh Rankin-Davies, the Deputy First Minister, and Senedd Morgan, the First Minister, were really impressive. Full stop. They were impassioned. They pressed the right buttons. Do I think it's going to change the dial much? No, in of itself, this manifesto. I thought the manifesto was quite thin. I understand the reasons for doing that entirely. There was quite a lot of stuff on what they won't stop doing. And that's caused a bit of a kerfuffle. But, all of these things cost money, and it's not, can't be taken for granted that a lot of the benefits that people in Wales have enjoyed over the last 25 years will continue. But I think there were some things which caused problems, like the pledge that anyone with a pressing medical need will be seen within 48 hours should Labour win the next Senedd election, that seeing a GP is too much of a battle and just feels too slow. But lo and behold, Plaid Cymru, which we'll come on to in a minute, launched their campaign the same day and had a pledge that people will see their doctors within 24 hours rather than 48. And this is the difficulty. I mean, they had to clarify afterwards, Plaid, that it would be at the end of the term. There's no magic switch that you can. So I think that Labour are being very pragmatic and they know what's achievable within the financial envelope. I'm just not sure it's going to excite people as much as the offerings in other manifestos. But there was a real focus on fairness, cost of living, and I do think that's the right way to go, given where they are at the minute.
And, if they carry on as they are right up until the election, you're going to be able to get an appointment with the NHS before you're ill. It'll be quite remarkable. Craig, what did you make of it? I mean, a lot of it was, like Jo says, we're going to carry on doing stuff that we have already been doing, but also we're going to not do stuff that we've not done anyway. So it's a bit sort of like, it's a I hate this phrase, but strong and stable.
Yeah. Well, something and something. Yeah. So when we got sort of like some of the key messages came out in the media on the Sunday night, I was reading it. I was scratching my head, thinking, "Am I misinterpreting this? Does it not make sense? Do I not understand it?" Because the pledge from Labour is that they rule out. I can't even remember what it is now. They rule out. What's the phrase? What's the phrase? What's the way? They rule out income tax rises. And
not
I was
to use Welsh powers to raise income tax, powers that they've never used.
And this is a power that's been in place for some considerable time now in Wales. The Conservatives and Reform have said that they would use those powers to actually cut taxes. And Labour are saying, we've never done this before. We've always been in charge. We've never raised taxes before. And by the way, we still won't raise taxes. And I read that actually as, you could phrase this as Welsh Labour refused to cut taxes. And that won't go down very well, will it?
Well, I suspect, just to jump in there very quickly, I suspect they're expecting other parties to attack them for that. And I would say, because it is my big bugbear on all of these things. How the hell are you going to afford it? And I am still,
Yep.
I have not seen a single sentence that reassures me that either the Tories or Reform know how they are going to pay for this. So let's put it in that context.
Yeah, and I reached out to a couple of Labour candidates to say, what's your feeling on this messaging? And what they've come back with, I'm just going to look at my WhatsApp. So I got told, essentially, it feels like they're heading off tax and spend accusations early on. And potentially, I don't know, I'd maybe read into that there's a suggestion that Labour are being very clear on this early on, prior to the Plaid manifesto coming out, because perhaps they're going to try and suggest that actually either Plaid sums don't add up, or potentially, as a comparison, the only way that Plaid can pay for some of their commitments is with a tax rise at some point. Now, no one's told me that specifically, but I'm reading in between the lines on that, and let's see what those suggestions and that scrutiny is of the Plaid manifesto in a week or so, maybe.
Yeah, and it comes back, doesn't it, to the other key message that came out through Hugh and Elined's speeches was that, they're trying to frame Labour as the competent, serious party about running the country, that, they've got experience. As I say, I'm not sure that message will cut through in the way that they want it to, but I do think there are big questions over the delivery of other parties' plans.
Isn't that those sort of... It's sort of the luxury of not being in power, isn't it? It's sort of, you can be a lot more radical, and we know this. We know that however much you box yourself in, which is what, Labour in the general election did on tax and spend and boxed itself in unbelievably, it still thought the best way to go about things when it came into power was go, oh, well, now we've seen the books. Look at this huge financial problem we've got. Oh, we can't deliver some of the stuff that we've promised already, or it might take longer. When you're in power, that's a lot harder argument to make. Whereas, when you're not, it's just sort of factored in politics, isn't it?
It is to a certain extent, but Plaid are going to be the last party, I think, to unveil their full manifesto, and I suspect that's because it's had to be honed back quite a lot. They are double and triple checking, because if you've waited 25 years to get your fingers on the levers of power, the last thing you want is to put forward a programme for government, pledges in your manifesto, and you end up delivering 60%. Now, whether good or bad, Elizabeth Morgan said in one of the last plenary sessions that Labour have delivered 98%, I think, which is kind of where you want. Between 95 and 100 when you're in government is what you want to deliver of your manifesto. They are very, very concerned, I think, to make sure they aren't in a position where they've been in last few elections where it really has been pie in the sky. They want to make sure that they can, have a good go at delivering the bulk of this manifesto.
Can I just raise, just when we move on to other matters, Craig, the Welsh Labour comms recently, which involved posting on Facebook and Twitter. There's this thing going around, which is like drawing on what's that app that's Strava. I don't run, so I don't know what it is. But
pass.
If you see me running, follow me, because there's a problem. Basically the trend is that you run a certain route and it like writes a word with your route or something like that, or it draws a picture or things like that, and you post it up, and it's this sort of like weird meme thing going on the internet. Welsh Labour have posted...
I love the way you're trying to describe like pop culture via a podcast, Ollie. Sorry, but
four of them posted 4 of them, which are £4 billion paid to build new hospitals in Wales, and the sort of Strava thing, which says NHS on it. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll just hold it up, which is much more easier than me explaining it. Yeah. Likewise, the £2 bus fare cap, they've just written £2 on there. A new Clean Water Act, they've put some droplets of water over a map, and expanding the young person's guarantee, some sort of certificate exists there, which... Basically, the point is it's supposed to correspond to some roads that you might have run on. What they've essentially done is just drawn on paint over the top of a map. and this has incensed me greatly, probably out of proportion, and it left me just thinking, Craig, have they just entirely lost the plot in how they run any sort of digital comms in any
Well,
way?
there's an argument they've jumped the shark. There's an argument that, they're trying to go viral, but they tried this during the Caerphilly by-election. You can't keep, trying the same innovative new way of doing things over and over again. It doesn't become innovative anymore. I would also observe, and this is not about Labour. This is most politicians and political parties. By the time they get onto a bandwagon, it's way gone. This is something that was done some time ago. It's interesting because we're talking about it, aren't we? So again, it's got attention. But then I had a conversation with someone about this thing the other day, and they looked at it and they went, "Oh, it's got 400 comments, most of them negative." So it's not necessarily the eyes that you want.
Yes, all coverage is good coverage does not necessarily always apply, I would suggest. But there we go. But I have just read out 4 campaign pledges. So
Exactly.
Well done, Welsh Labour, you got me. Rightio, in just a moment, we will turn our attention to Plaid Cymru and the Green Party. And of course, along the way, do get in touch with us. Remember to subscribe on your podcast app as well. You can watch us on YouTube too if you want to see those posts that I was just talking about. Just search for Senedd Sources, where we upload full episodes for you to enjoy. And the WhatsApp number you need along the way, send a voice note is best so we can play it out. 0333 404 6507 and start your message with the word Senedd. And we'll be right back, including with Craig's Correspondence Corner. This is the Senedd Sources podcast. Thanks for being with us today. It's Ollie, Jo and Craig. Hope you are doing all right. There has been a lot going on this week. We've just been talking about Labour's manifesto, but also a couple of campaign launches to discuss. Let's start with where we sort of left off, Craig, in terms of just discussing what the Labour manifesto was trying to head off in future with Plaid Cymru's campaign launch. Now, we think their manifesto might be the last one to come along the way, but they've still got to kick off their campaign. Thoughts, queries, questions?
It feels like we've had an awful lot of launches, an awful lot of campaign
Boy, does
restarts.
it feel like we have. I'm glad I'm not alone.
No, the fact that we have got more parties being seriously involved in this election, but also Plaid launching their manifesto so late in the day. We've had their 100 days plan. We've had their launch. Some people have suggested their 100-day plan has plans to make plans. I wonder if we've had a launch of a launch at some point. I'm genuinely getting to the point where I'm trying to work out what is coming next, in what order, and if there's any serious announcements in them. What I thought was most interesting, though, was the timing of it. The fact that Plaid chose to launch their campaign on essentially the same day as, almost the same hour as the Labour manifesto launch, meant that Labour got some good coverage the night before when they trailed it with the media. They got a hit first thing in the morning. And then let's be realistic, all of the coverage after that, again, was about selfies with Renat Purewith and Plaid Cymru launch events. So Plaid has done a really good job, actually, of beating Labour to it, I would say, without actually really saying much.
And the spirit of Caerphilly is what Renat Purewith was bringing up, Jo, and that framing of, once again, this 2-horse race. It's us or reform, which is, they're just really going to gun that message gung-ho until May, aren't they?
Absolutely. I was gently chiding a Plaid candidate in the week about this message that they're doing on doorsteps right across Wales of, you've got to vote Plaid Cymru to beat reform. Other votes might be wasted. And they were going, yeah, you do exactly the same if it was a Labour reform battle. And, fair enough, it's absolutely true. But we'll come on to leaflets in a minute. Oh, my goodness. It seems that it's a straight choice between reform and every other party, according to the leaflets that I've got, which we'll go through in a minute. But very much evoking the spirit of Caerphilly by-election, Fri'n saying that, the spirit of that vote right across Wales could drive them towards the formation of government. No surprise that he had a lot to say about Labour failings, on NHS schools, tackling child poverty, etc. And to counter a Linned's claim that they're the ones with the experience, they're the ones that know what it's like to govern, they're the safe pair of hands. He's saying that, it's a choice between hope and division, credibility and chaos, with them and reform, that Labour completely out of the picture. So yeah, I just to go back to Craig's point though about the number of launches, campaign launches, mini kind of we've got an idea launches, and then manifesto. You just kind of think, I'm looking forward to some serious scrutiny of policies rather than just opportunities for the selfies, etc., that you're talking about. But, parties are going to try and find cut through any way they can. But I'd quite like the next, forgot to say, 5 weeks today, polling day.
Yes.
But, I think it's going to be an incredibly busy 5 weeks with parties just scrumming it out to see who can, get the limelight.
And you've got parties can just hold events. You don't need to call it a launch of everything every time.
No,
that would be my
everything.
message.
Everything is a launch. Everything.
You're on a campaign. You're just allowed to hold a campaign event. It's okay. You could do that. And what I found also interesting, and relating to your point, Jo, a little bit earlier, is when we spoke to Reen on the podcast, he was talking about walking a very, very, very sort of gentle walk to May, and that manifesto coming quite late hints at that as well. The fact that these events don't necessarily involve a big policy that they're announcing, they just involve, hey, we're running for election. The fact that lack of policy and scrutiny on that policy so far suggests that they are going to try and very, 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 very delicately try and get away with the polls just sort of staying as they are, not doing anything to upset them too much. It's very reflective of the Keir Starmer campaign, where you just sort of don't commit to too much, don't say too much in the run-up. Basically, you are the party that people currently think should win, and so you can just sort of get away with that Ming Vase strategy. The problem is that if something upsets that, it could really upset it because of this new voting system and the fact that you've got more parties involved now. But that is interesting. One thing that was interesting, actually, just moving to the Green Party campaign launch, was that the Greens actually had a pop at Plaid Cymru at their campaign launch, which was interesting because we were talking to them a few weeks back, and they said, it won't just be an open book. Yeah, we'll join you. They're saying they're the Kingmakers, but there are red lines. And so the fact that they're already starting to differentiate themselves, Craig, and Plaid are going to have to put up with attacks from pretty much everyone, even the party that might go into some sort of coalition with them, is going to be a difficult few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you expect this from all the parties, and let's be realistic. The day after the election, I'm pretty sure that they'll be having some, if required, and if there's an opportunity, some pretty serious conversations about how they can work together. But opposition parties, whoever they may be, will not forget this, and you can assume that in 2, 3, even 4 years' time, what the Greens said at that launch and what parties that they applied might end up working with or said against them will ultimately be brought up in plenary. First Minister, what's your response to your now coalition colleague who said X, Y, and Z about you only 3 weeks ago? We can expect that. I mean, look, we saw it when we had David Cameron and Nick Clegg had their Rose Garden session. Oh my days, what is that like? 16 years ago, blimey, because it's not 16 years ago, surely, but yeah, when it was like 16 years ago, and and then everyone kept talking about, well, you said this about Nick Clegg, and Nick Clegg said this about you only a few weeks ago. So I think actually it'll be held somewhere in storage until the right time by the opposition parties more than anything.
It was. I'll always remember that. All credit to Andy Bell from Channel 5, who's a great colleague of mine, who sat in that Rose Garden speech. And I think the line was, David Cameron, you once were asked, what is your favourite joke? And you answered Nick Clegg. And he was there stood next to him. And they had to sort of kiss and make up there and then, which I quite enjoyed. Jo, let's move to the Greens then. So let's start Leaflet Corner, Craig's Correspondence Corner, with a leaflet, because you've had something from the Greens this week, who this week said they are the Kingmakers, but even they are running with the message, It's us or reform.
Yeah, and just very quickly want to say something about the Plaid green scrapping, because I thought what was fascinating, you expect scraps amongst all the parties during a campaign, don't you? But Tessa Marshall was, really going for it, candidate for the Greens, saying that Plaid aren't a left-wing party, masquerading as it in the South, maybe. And, things we've talked about, already rolled back on net zero, those kind of things. But honestly, the outrage from Plaid was quite astonishing. It wasn't just a kind of, they would say that, wouldn't they? And I do think it's fascinating that the Plaid candidate, Carrie Harper, for example, I think seems perfectly content, and the party generally seems perfectly content that the Greens should be attacking Reform or Labour or whatever, but you can't attack us. It's just not in the manual. Why are you doing this? So kind of criticism from the left and other pro-indie voices in particular just kind of leaves them reaching for the smelling salts, which is fascinating. But yes, we have, I had a full house this week in terms of leaflets, even a knock on the door. The Green Party leaflet I've had is 3 reasons to vote Green in, it's a huge leaflet. Stop Reform. It says it's a straight fight between the Greens and Reform, meaning your votes could stop Reform winning here in Caerdydd, Fynnon Taf. They're all doing it, aren't they? Same message, more or less, in nearly every leaflet that I've had.
And Craig, what have you had?
Well, I can never remember the name of the constituency. It's so many words, so many old constituencies. Pontypridd Conon Merthyr is the constituency that we just live in here. We've had nothing from the Greens, which I think is telling, because that tells us where they are and are not focusing on. But somebody has sent me something that they received from the Green Party. I'm going to hold this up if you can see that. So for anyone watching, obviously not anyone listening, important information in very plain, bold text. Senedd election, 7th of May, 2026. And then a picture of a bilingual polling station sign. And then top left corner, very, very small, there's a Green Party logo without the words Green Party underneath it, which I think is interesting. And I imagine what this is trying to do is make you pick it up thinking this is a information leaflet about the election. This is something official. But then when you open it up, it's really green, like in colour. And then it's got the, this is from Caerdydd Penarth, as it happens. Caerdydd Penarth, who can win seats here? And the final seat is a direct fight between the Greens and Reform. So the messaging is exactly the same, but it's masquerading as something plain, informative, and straight down the line, I would say. So it's an interesting tactic from them. It does have an imprint, but it's only weirdos like us that look at the imprint first.
Exactly. And I'm interested that they mentioned the 6th seat, because this one doesn't at all. And the other fascinating thing about the Green leaflet is more of the same with Labour, dangerous far-right Reform, not a mention of Plaid in this entire leaflet.
Yes.
Yeah. I think what's interesting here as well is that they've put the dots, they've put, if I read this as I think they want us to infer, they're suggesting in Caerdydd Penarth it goes Plaid, Reform, Green, Labour, Plaid, and then it's Reform or the Greens. So they're suggesting that, Labour, don't bother voting Labour because they're already going to get one here. Don't bother voting Plaid because they've already got 2. In fact, the Greens have got 1. And what I would say for anyone that receives this, they'll go, well, actually, if I want Reform and I want to give the Greens a kicking, I need to vote Reform. It depends who's getting this. I don't know if it's targeted or if it's to everyone in the constituency. I can't remember who sent me this. I've had a lot of things on WhatsApp. Thank you for everyone that keeps sending me all these leaflets. All I can do is differentiate based on kitchen floors and fingernails, to be honest with you, as to who sent them to me now. And that's just what the peripheries of all these pictures of leaflets that I'm getting.
What I enjoyed about that particular sort of phrasing is, 1, how you read it like you were doing the poem about Henry VIII's wives. And 2, the other thing I enjoyed was that actually it shows the sort of difficulty of campaigning in this 6-list system, which is just a list of parties and you sort of go, okay, well, I'm just going to turn up and vote, and I'm not really sure what this sort of bit of information is supposed to tell me. Jo, you've had what I would describe as the most dense bit of promotional material I have seen in some
Define
time.
dense as well, yeah?
Huge.
Oh, yeah, not that way. Too many words on paper kind of way. Oh my goodness. So I very rarely get anything from the Conservatives, but we have a newspaper which is Use Your Vote to Get Wales Working. There's no great Welsh Conservative badging on it, but the picture on the front has the candidates and Darren Miller, so you know it's from. But oh my goodness, for those watching, sorry for those who are listening, it is just word soup. It is absolutely dense. To be fair, it's bilingual, as it should be, but they're trying to cram so much in here that I think you would just switch off and you'd put it in the recycling bag, to be honest. They don't talk much about the other parties. Safe to say that Reform can't get a majority, and locally it's Welsh Conservatives who can win and beat Labour and Plaid Cymru. Actually, the latest polling show that they aren't on course to get a single seat here. But I just want to, this is probably my favourite that came, and not for good reasons, this week.
So yeah, I've had. Oh,
it's
sorry,
a
I've been sent that one as
Dem
well.
leaflet. And the front and back
It's
are
like a road
exactly the
sign.
same. It's division and chaos in one direction, a brighter future. Which direction will you choose? Nothing to tell you which party it's come from until you open it. And half of it is taken up with Reform stuff. Bad. The other half is taken up with Lib Dem stuff. Good. But it took me a while. Seriously, I was kind of looking at this thing, realised I had to open it, and you've got sort of, Vote Reform UK to privatise our NHS, cut vital services, Vote Lib Dems to protect the NHS, stop wasteful spending on Welsh independence. But again, everyone is, going back to that point, everyone is targeting reform. And again, is that going to make a difference on May the 7th? This one is so tricky to call, particularly in terms of those 4, 5, 6 seats where all of the, who would ever think we'd say that Labour was a smaller party, but it's the 4, 5, 6 seats that Labour, Plaid in some constituencies, Greens and the Tories are going to be scrapping over.
Finish us off, Craig, with one more from the Conservatives that you've had, which is less dense.
Well, I was going to say I've had something from Plaid as well, which is very policy focused, which is nice for a change. I've had a few different policy ones from Plaid. So on the Plaid one, briefly, before we got one, I said about childcare, and then we've had one, I guess it's a Wales-wide one, about train funding and transport. But again, I've had a few things from Plaid that are all very policy focused as opposed to people or message focused, which is interesting. The really non-dense one I've had from the Conservatives is against everything that I think the party expects from a leaflet. I'm really sorry to say to the candidate who is going to be listening to this and who has knocked my door before. It's a campaign leaflet that essentially looks like a local council leaflet, and it's entirely in English. And I reached out to somebody in the Conservative Party to check, is the policy still, because when I was a candidate, the policy was always that leaflets should be bilingual. And what I got told is, yes, leaflets are meant to be bilingual. However, it's really difficult for us to stop local candidates making their own things and putting them out locally. And it's very much an old school template. It's a template that was used, 10, 15 years ago. But it's got a QR code on it, so it's nice and modern. I'm not sure this will go down very well, where I'd say we have a lot of Welsh speakers in this village. But equally, they might not be voting Conservative anyway. But hey.
Probably a good bet. One other thing I wanted to say, Ollie, before we close, I got my polling card through this week, and just public service announcement again. you can register to vote in the Senedd elections by 20th of April. What's the date today? 2nd of April.
2nd.
Still plenty of time. So if you know someone who hasn't filled out that very, very simple form yet, there is still time to make sure you have your say on May 7th.
On that point as
Indeed.
well, so I've had a few people when I've been sort of asked to do presentations to groups about the election, people have said, do we need to take polling cards with us? Well, obviously, no, you don't need to take your polling card with you. But the other question that I've been asked quite a lot is, do we need ID in this election? And again, the response I've given to that is, no, you don't need ID in a devolved election. It is only for a Westminster election. But there's a lot of uncertainty around that, I would say.
What's interesting about that is, so in the English local elections, you do need ID. But in the Welsh ones, you don't necessarily. What I would say is, it's always good to carry it.
Just in case.
If you've got it, you may as well. And it's similar. You never need your polling card, and yet I am a person who always puts it in my pocket as I head out the door.
I would say, briefly on ID, I was speaking to a rural Conservative MP a few years ago, and they had just bumped into one of their constituents who was coming away from the polling station very angrily. He said, "What's up? What's the matter?" And they were very angry because the polling station wouldn't accept their shotgun license as a form of ID. And they had sent them away to go and get another piece of ID.
One of my friends once managed to pay for a bottle of wine by using the fact that they also were paying for a copy of the New Statesman and had an article with a picture of them in it in the paper as ID. So you can get around these things. Listen, thank you, Jo. Thank you, Craig. Plenty more to come as we are 5 weeks away from that big Senedd election, and we will cover it at all angles here on Senedd Sources. Just press subscribe on your podcast app, and you can find us to watch on YouTube as well. We drop into your feeds every week. You will not miss a thing. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next Thursday.